The problem we are facing right now is that our menus instantaneously appear without giving any visual feedback. What I aim to do is animate them when I open them. This adds a bounce effect on the menus, and it's much better for user interface point of view. Let's get started. Alright, let's continue from the project we built in the previous video where we created our main menu. I have made a couple of small visual tweaks since then. The active button color has been adjusted, and I also changed the font so the menu feels a bit cleaner. If we open the button material, you will see something slightly different now. Instead of a single color for the active state, we are now using a gradient between active color A and active color B. The inactive state works the same way, using inactive color A and inactive color B. It's a small change, but gradients help the UI feel a bit more polished. Now let's start adding some animations. Firstly, open the widget blueprint of your submenu, that is home. Right now the text is floating on its own, so I am going to wrap it with a border and increase the size slightly so the menu panel is more visually defined. I will set the background color to black and set an opacity to 0.7, which can be set using the alpha value of the color picker. I will also center the text and increase the font size to 42. To work with animations, you can press Ctrl, Shift and Spacebar, and up comes the animation panel. You can also dock it into the layout so it doesn't go away. Now press the plus icon and create a new animation called BounceEffect. With the animation selected, highlight the canvas panel and click Add. Notice that if I select the border instead, the animation would be applied to the border. But in this case, we want the entire menu to animate, so make sure the canvas panel is selected before adding the track. Now in the details panel, go to transform and scale. Make sure the animation timeline is at 0.0 seconds, then set the scale to 0.9 on both X and Y and add a keyframe. Move the timeline to 0.05, set the scale to 1.1 and add another keyframe. Finally, move the timeline to 0.1 seconds, set the scale back to 1 and add the last keyframe. This creates a quick bounce effect when the menu appears. You can also experiment with different FPS settings here depending on how smooth you want the animation to be. Next, open the graph for widget blueprint home. Since we don't need the existing unused events, I'll remove those and create a new function called play bounce home. Inside this function, we simply run the play animation node and select the animation we just created from the left side sidebar. Now go back to our widget blueprint main. Inside the on-clicked event of our play button, of our home button, we'll get a reference to our widget blueprint home and we will play the function that we created. Connect the pins and compile the project. Let's repeat a similar setup for another menu. Open WB account. First, I will wrap the text with a border. I will stretch it out a bit and remove the offset value so the border fills the anchor area. Then I will change the background color to black, set the opacity to 0.7. I will center the text and change the font size to 42. Now you can open the animations panel and create another animation called BounceEffect. Highlight the canvas panel and add it to the animation. At 0 seconds, we will set the scale to 0.9. Then at 0.1 second, we'll increase it to 1.2. Finally, at 0.25 seconds, we will bring it back down to 1. You will notice that the values are different, and since this animation is running for 0.25 seconds, it will be a slightly slower bounce. Now open the graph and create a new function, call it play bounce count, and run the play animation node with the animation we just created. Back in our main menu, we'll define when to run this animation. On clicked event of our account button, we will fetch a reference to our widget blueprint account and we will run this function. Compile and save the project. If we run the game now, we can see the bounce effect playing when the menu appears. As you can see, the bounce effect for both Our home and account screens are different. The animation for our accounts panel is a bit slower. Now let's build a slightly different animation for the settings menu. Open WB settings. Again, I'll wrap the text with a border, change the background to black, make it slightly larger, center the text, and set the font size to 42. Now in the animations panel, we will create a new animation and we'll call it SlideUp. Highlight the canvas panel and add it to the animation timeline. At 0 seconds, set the Y translation to 500. So the panel starts off screen. Then at 0 0.1 seconds, set it to -100. And finally at 0 0.15, set it to 0. Now let's also animate the text. Highlight the text box and add it to our timeline. At 0 seconds, find the translation for our text box and we will set it to 100. At 0 0.1 seconds, we will set it to -50. And at 0 0.15, we will reset it to 0. Looks like I forgot to add the final keyframe for the canvas panel earlier, so I will quickly fix that. We'll compile this file and open the graph. Create a new function called playSlideSettings. And again, use play animation to trigger the animation we created. Back in WB main, inside the settings button's onClicked event, get a reference to WB settings and call this function. Now when we run the game, you can see the bounce effect for other menus. And the slide animation for the settings menu. If you want to study the animation more closely, we can slow it down by adjusting the playback speed to 0.1. Now when we run the game again, the settings menu slides up in slow motion so you can clearly see the motion. Before we wrap up, it's worth mentioning that the bounce and slide animations we created here are just a couple of examples. In Unreal Engine, you can animate a lot more than just scale and position. For example, we have already seen the bounce effect, and we can add multiple keyframes. So for this slide animation, I've added a lot more than just 3 keyframes for text and for the canvas panel. We can also use the fade in animation. If you select border and scroll a bit, you will find render opacity, and we can adjust this value to give it a fade in animation. We can also do a fade out animation by reversing the opacity, and if you want, you can also rotate it. You can also change the text color. You can also change the text content, and you can also change the text color. If you select an element in the hierarchy and look over in the details panel, you will notice small keyframe icons next to many properties. Whenever you see that icon, it means that property can be animated. So whether it's scale, translation, rotation, color, opacity, or other visual settings, you can create animations simply by adding keyframes on the timeline. Once you understand this workflow, you can start combining these properties to create much more complex UI animations and transitions. And that is it for this one. In the next video, we are going to take things a step further and build a more advanced menu animation system. where menus will slide left and right depending on navigation. Until then, go make something cool. Goodbye for now.